Hi, good evening, everyone from Mumbai. I'm Elsa Marie De Silva, founder and CEO of the Red Dot Foundation. Welcome to my podcast. I'm a bit physically busy, but I'm back now with my friend, Patralekha Chatterjee. She is a journalist, an award winning journalist. She's also an author and she writes a lot on development issues, especially health and gender. So, welcome, Patralekha. How are you doing?
Great, welcome. I'm very, very delighted to be in this show, Elsa, and great to see you, though it's virtually.
Yeah, I know this is the way we connect nowadays. That's why I'm having all these coffee chats because at least gives me an opportunity to connect with friends who I haven't met in a long time.
Yeah, coffee is my thing. In fact, my Twitter bio says so. Coffee, calamari, and conversations. Everything else is private.
So, how has the pandemic treated you? How has it been?
You know, like everyone else, I think it took a long time for me, for a lot of people to really catch on. What was really going to happen. Um, we we thought this is just a few months, and things will get over. Till about January, February. We were actually going. I'm a journalist, so we were covering rallies, political rallies. Delhi was going through a very turbulent period, as you. So we were doing that, really going to crowded spots, and then these cases started coming, and then there was a lockdown, which of course really got everybody by surprise. I would say one of the things this pandemic has done, there's been a lot of mental stress, right? But I think it's also made, of course, as a journalist, one is always interacting, and me especially, with a huge a spectrum of people, and that is one of the reasons why I became a journalist, because I didn't want to go through life meeting people just like me, or from my socioeconomic bracket. But to me personally, and it's just a personal take, it's made me so aware of my privileges, and I don't mean just money, or the fact that I'm, and it's made me, one always knew that, but it kind of brings home. It's not just the most poor people, which we know what they are about, but lower middle class woman. I remember a woman, a neighborhood parlor, a woman who runs a neighborhood parlor, and she's actually a widow. Uh, she When her husband died, the all that she had was this house, and she had to pay EMI on that, and she used to run a little hole in the joint parlor. And but then when the lockdown happened, no parlor, no activity, no nothing. And she used up all her savings, and then she said, I'm down to my last 10,000 rupees. What do you want me to do? Do you want me to go and stand actually along with all the, the really the destitute, and beg for food? I can't do that. So the poignancy of people's individual tragedies, to me, a lot of my human connections, I go for a walk every evening, and I actually talk to people. And it's not like something I'm doing as a virtue signaling, not for the story necessarily. The flower seller, the auto driver, to me, this is one way of remaining connected, to myself. As a human being, and to me, this has been, of course, we stand at a distance and we talk, but to me, these stories that people tell me, some of them I write about, some of them I don't write about. They're very important because it's taking me beyond myself, and that's one of my actually, one of the ways I've been coping, by just seeing things which are beyond myself.
That's true. And
I'm
you've
sorry.
you've been covering health and other development issues all these
Yeah.
years. Can you share how this pandemic, one is people have slipped into poverty. A lot of people who have
Yeah.
come out of poverty have now gone back into poverty. But what are the other effects of it, especially in rural areas, especially with women and girls that you are noticing?
I haven't been traveling that much. I have done a little bit of traveling within, Delhi NCR, and we took, my husband and I, made some short road journeys. by car. So we stop and talk. So it's by phone. One of the things is, during the lockdown, there was this complete, people couldn't go. I mean, living in South Delhi and you're in South Bombay, we are in a bubble, right? I mean, let's be, we can have the best of health facilities, etc. Now, even in normal times, people can't access basic healthcare. People have to walk miles. That also includes going and getting a COVID test. So when there was a lockdown, I remember talking to a guy who was in a remote tribal village in Jharkhand, and his biggest worry was, of course, he had no money, but he said he had some chickens, some vegetables, some kitchen garden, so he could manage. But his biggest worry was that he has elderly parents, and they had um, you know blood pressure, high blood pressure, etc., etc. The normal kind of comorbidities, as they say, it's a jargon for a lot of elderly people, but also younger people have it. And he says, what do I do if they have to be suddenly in the hospital? I don't have a car, I don't know where to go. And then also in the initial period, particularly, all the health workers, health facilities were kind of oriented towards COVID, right? So I think there was a lot of turmoil and the sheer panic, and in Delhi I was, sitting on my desk in my study, or in Twitter, people are saying, my father, he needs to be rushed to this hospital, that hospital. So the panic. Now the fact that, touch wood, very luckily, I have had a lot of my friends lose their husbands, their parents, their loved ones. In the sort of in the close circle, right? Relatives. My the domestic, the lady who's works for me part time, she lost her son. So it's the pandemic has knocked on my door. So yes, I've not been, touch wood, so far directly affected, but the panic, the I think what the pandemic did is really, I mean, we all know in India, it has a lot of fault lines, a lot of problems. I think it just brought out in the open, like a pimple or something burst open, out in the open, all the things we like to normally, you know, um, put away. We don't want to hear about it. We don't want to know about it because it spoils our breakfast, our dinner, or whatever, our calm lives. But the pandemic is one thing, and especially for women, and you and I are actually, our connections go back to violence and gender issues and things. The women in all these, the vulnerable sections are more affected. So when there's less money, when there's a problem about who the money will be spent on, less food, the woman, the girls, take a hit. I'm not talking about the very rich. I'm talking about people like you're down to your last 100 rupees. The mother will starve because she wants a husband or the children. So I mean, there are all these things, and women don't talk about their problems. So I think there are a lot of interlinked issues, which again in academic jargon they call social determinants, which ultimately affect your health, your sense of well-being. Your So there are many things which come in. you know um, how do I actually did a give a talk in Tata Institute of Social Science online, and also recently in the Institute of Health, Bangalore, on the gendered way of looking at the pandemic, sorry, through the gender lens and the different reasons. It isn't just the obvious things, you know. So, but tell me about you. I'm doing all the talking. How have you been, and how have you been coping?
So, I mean, I think it's a matter of privilege. The pandemic has truly brought out the privilege in all of us. If we can cope, it's because of that privilege. So I am fine. I've actually done quite interesting work during the last 8 months.
Wow,
I've got a handle of my personal schedule. So I've got into a daily exercise routine, which is great
great.
for my health. And we managed to pivot online, and in fact, we've reached more people than if we were to do things in person. So we've done workshops for over 6,000 people in the last 8 months on
Fantastic.
educating, yeah, on their rights, on different aspects of sexual and gender-based violence. So in that sense, it's fine. But there's also the downside. We've seen how the lack of access, especially
Yeah.
access to not only the internet, but lack of access to a device, has left a lot of women and girls out of this online space, which has become so central
Exactly.
to our lives. And I was curious, I've also done a series with another friend of mine every Wednesday, which we call Inclusive Cities, trying to understand how these fault lines that are so obvious during a crisis can be rectified, if at all. And in your opinion, because you've been covering these issues for a long time, and you really, I think, have a perspective that we don't, because we are in our own bubbles.
Well, I'm
Pre-COVID,
also in my own bubble. I was I just try sometimes to get out. Yeah.
sure, but as a journalist covering these issues, and especially the health issues, even prior to COVID, it was not in the, our health system was not robust enough. So when they
Yeah.
say build back better, and everything is like now forward looking, how do you recover from this? So how do you even build systems better? Do you think that it's gone past a phase where we can't do anything, or there's hope that we can? Because I was watching a documentary about Mongolia, and
Hmm.
Asia has had various similar pandemics, and after H1N1 and SARS, Mongolia took upon itself with the WHO to put in place a health resilience program. And today they are very capable of, managing a pandemic like this one that we are going through. Can India also do the same, or is it too big of a problem that we can't, and we'd have to rely on our local governments? Give us some hope. I'm struggling.
Ah, well, I think for me, I've traveled. I mean, I'm very old. So I've traveled actually about to about 70 countries, more than that. I think 80 countries over the last 30 years that I've been in this profession, and seen a lot of good practices. And I'm also part of an international project right now where we are looking at some of these human consequences. Um, and of course, there's a lot to learn from other countries, mainly in terms of how how they had this preparedness. Countries which are doing well relatively. So I actually don't buy this binary that let's fix the economy first and then we'll do after health. Because if you look at the countries which are actually doing well, they're not seeing it as a binary. Their economy is bouncing back because they got the health bit, and the pandemic response well. And I think part of it is also in many cases, like say for East Asia, many countries, also Iceland and all these places. I think it's been also preparedness, emergency preparedness, that mindset that you actually don't wait for a crisis to happen. Of course, nobody could have predicted this pandemic. That's all countries are affected. You have some things in place, but I think yes, we can learn a lot from others, but we can also learn from ourselves. I mean, it's not that India is one black hole. And I'm thinking of Kerala. I mean, of course, I'm not saying Kerala is perfect. That there's been no problems in Kerala. Recently, there were some stories that Kerala is undercounting its deaths. I think every state is. Probably Kerala. I haven't been to Kerala, but Kerala, from what I see, that even when the cases are rising, fatality is low. And one of the reasons, and because I've actually been to Kerala earlier and see how they do things, like after the floods and all, done stories and all for the Lancet and places, or Nipah, how they manage. I think they have an emergency preparedness kind of system which is functional, and it's so that it takes them much less effort to kind of operationalize it. And what I really believe that you can't start functioning very well in a crisis time if you don't function during normal times. So typically what we do is that we post pandemic, and in fact just the other day I was asking on Twitter, what will we remember once the pandemic is over? Will it be the little stories? Will it be the big picture? And there were some very cynical people who said we'll remember nothing. After 3 or 4 years it'll be. I hope that doesn't happen, because there are things like, what we saw, the migrant story. A lot of things could have been done, could have been prevented. I come from that space where I think that inclusiveness is actually enlightened self-interest. If we don't look after our most vulnerable, we will eventually kick ourselves. So for instance, again, I go back to a state like Kerala. One of the reasons why they look after their migrant workers better, they actually airlifted some of them to get back to work during this pandemic, is because it's in everybody. If you treat your people well, they don't fall sick, they do better. It's a win-win situation. It's not just pure altruism or just virtue or goodness and all. Of course that may be there, but it's also good smart business. If you treat people like disposables, it doesn't matter if you fall sick because I can get somebody else. you know I spoke to a lot of migrants who were walking back. I'm talking about the long march. They were like so hard. It's this thing that all, we work our butt out for people, for this minuscule, and our employers, nobody cares. The government, it doesn't care. That's why the march, when people are really desperate, when they feel they have no stakes, what they will do, we don't know that. We've not been in that situation. So I think that when we build back, we should have cushions. We should have some social safety nets. Yes, the government, I think, is a major player, but also society. Like the young girl who committed suicide, a college girl, because she couldn't pay her fees. There are millions and millions of people right now, as we speak, who are falling through the cracks. One thing is they should feel that they have somewhere to turn to. It isn't like your unique case. If you have a personal crisis, I personally had a lot of people call me up. These are strangers. That's one of the things which has happened during the pandemic. People I barely know, people who are strangers, just met once or just have a profession. They've called me up and we've chatted. I don't say advice on what should I do. It's a personal crisis or it's something work related. I'm not saying I have the answers, nor does anybody else. But I think no matter where we are, no matter whether we are married or unmarried or family or friends, I think just being able to talk to somebody helps. And sometimes, that itself can give you strength that you feel maybe you won't just go and take your life or you won't go and, do something desperate. So I think one of the things we can do is, at least at the local, and everything is going to go hyper local. It is the hyper local. I mean, because we know that the big things don't work. So I think within our communities, within our groups, if somehow some kind of a safe space could be created where you could just chat, say this is what it is without being judged, whether you want to put your name or not is different. I think that would be, because this pandemic is with us. It is not going away, anytime really soon. So I think we need that kind of an emotional safe space, which is actually low cost at one level, not so much money. And then we could maybe, like, crowdsource and things. Of course, the government, I think, has a role to play also.
So, in your opinion, what are the good practices that you have seen, whether in India or in other countries, in creating that emotional safe space? How do you get a society till there? Because right now, people are so panicked, even to tell their neighbors that they have COVID. And therefore, they are depriving themselves of information and putting others at risk. They're not even checking themselves because there's so much
Yeah,
low levels of trust within our
yeah,
societies. So how
exactly,
do you then create
exactly.
an emotional safe space for people to come up and say, "Hey, I have an issue with this, and I need help."
Yeah, I think some of the things that you're doing, what you're doing, or other people are doing, I think these are helpful. I mean, in for instance, one of the things I've seen, because I cover health, the kind of acute crisis that health workers, including doctors, have gone through. In the early stages, they didn't have PPE, they didn't have gloves, they were being overworked, and as usual, not everybody's in everybody can't be a hero. Everybody can't go up there, stick their neck out and say, I'll take on the government, I'll take on the management. Everybody, I mean, let's face it, and let's not judge people who are not able to frontally, boldly take a stand. But there were others who were doing that. And, we've had doctors networks and, nurses networks. And I've actually been in a couple of these kind of webinars and, things like that, where they have foregrounded these issues, and then maybe like agitated. I mean, I'm not saying there's only one way of putting your concern, in the public light, but the issues have to be there. I mean, I've had nurses telling me, that, the small private nursing homes, not the big corporate ones, that I think I'm using substandard PPE. I'm not even sure whether this protects me. So can you imagine if you are a health worker and you don't think you are protected? So I think, said about being given people confidence. Some of us are born confident, or we have acquired. Yeah, I don't think anybody's born confident, except some real brats. But I think some of us have acquired confidence through the lives we have led, because we have wrestled with problems, we have been rejected, we have been, whatever, and then we have found our way. So that gives you confidence. Confidence comes through action. Nobody can give you confidence, right? So I think not everybody has it, but I think to give people, I think, to make this point that everybody can speak out, have some phone numbers, have somewhere, local, if we can start with our local communities, that these are the people you can turn to. Not everybody will give you money or can give you money, they're not in a position. But even if like, I don't know, like for instance, small things, when I go to a parlor, say for a haircut, I talk to these people. And the other day, a woman told me, my husband, he has a catering business, and he can't pay his EMI. So, so I said, can I sometimes order some things from him? Just order and pass the word around. These are very small things. I'm not saying this is a systemic solution, but sometimes, you mentioned the word hope. I think this is very important. And the fact that somebody's listening to you, not generically listening, and to make you feel that, your life matters. Your life matters. So that people don't do desperate things. And no matter, I have a daughter at 20, and she's 22. And when she was young, I used to say, she's a very sensible girl, that no matter what happens to you, remember it isn't the first time it's happening to you. So, don't ever do something, no matter what the crisis is, and it feels terrible, but it's happened to someone somewhere. So never do anything desperate, and never do. And I say that to my young students, that yes, I understand when you're going through a crisis and it hits you, that it feels awful, but it's happened to someone somewhere. So it's important to talk, and it's important to listen. And all of us, I think, whether you're the highest or the lowest, can spare a little bit of time, even if you can't spare money, and if you can, that's good also. Help. Okay, I don't know somebody, maybe I can refer your case to somebody. Something can work out. So I think that's the reassurance, and I think this can start at the very community level, at the local level, through whatever networks one has. I think this is very important, the coping mechanisms.
I think mental health is such a big issue right now, and we need to talk about it all the time, just so that people get the confidence
Yeah,
that they can reach out and ask for help. And also then raise the collective awareness that we need more resources, we need
yeah,
more helplines, we
absolutely.
need more education, and we need more of mental health first aiders as well.
Yeah,
So
first
we just don't have
responders.
enough of professionals. Yeah. So tell
Yeah,
us a
that's
little bit
absolutely
about
true. Yeah, you're
tell us
saying.
about this new project that you're doing with Yale.
Well, it just came as actually quite a surprise to me, and I'm delighted. And maybe if it was normal times, I would be talking to you from somewhere else. But at the moment, I'm based in Delhi, and I'm quite happy not to be traveling at this point. And it's just, it's an international project, and involving, we just sort of looking at the human consequences, not really the science part of it. And it involves a lot of people who are scattered across, the globe. So that's part of it, and it ties in with the rest of my work that I do, and whom I've been sort of looking at, even when I do my stories and things, looking at other, like Africa, for instance, what are they coping? It's interesting actually that the richest countries, this pandemic has also told you that being rich itself is not an insulation. I mean, look at what's happening in the United States of America. So being rich in the rich world, is not necessarily or always wiser than us. And so there's a lot to learn, I think. And I think you talked about networks. One of the things I picked up on was something called, this is not related to the project I'm doing, but just on Twitter, something called long COVID. And I think that's going to be important, that you've, let's say, had COVID, you've recovered, you think you've recovered, but then after a few months you get these symptoms. And I've been actually coming across, again, anecdotal, there's no study, there's no data on a whole lot of things, how people are affected. And then I suddenly found this woman in England, she's formed a support group of people who are recovered, but then after a couple of months, they're facing these symptoms. And I think something like that also could be great in India. That people are going to recover, and they may feel that, oh, nobody's going to listen because I've recovered. So you're part of that statistics of recovery. So I think these little customized networks, where actually you're not doing that much, but you're absolutely right about needing, resources, and one can be openly philanthropic or quietly philanthropic. But I think resources are. I mean, I completely take your point that everything that we are doing. I mean, we all have to pay our bills, right? Most of us. I mean, we met at Vital Voices, and every single one of us works, and we pay our bills, and alongside we do a lot of other things. So I'm talking from the perspective of people who have to pay their bills, they have to make choices, and but we can still help. We can still help each other, and be a source of I don't know, support in whatever way it's possible.
Coming back to Vital Voices, it's an amazing network, and I'm lucky that I'm part of it because I meet people like you who always help me think about my work more deeply, but also help push my boundaries. So what does a network like that mean to you? I'm sure you're part of several networks, but when it comes to the sisterhood aspect, in your opinion?
I mean, we had a lot of fun, if you remember, and some of our conversations, really, it's been at weird hours, at weird places, airports, and in conference rooms in different countries. I think we met in South Africa, Tanzania, and I don't know where else, if I don't remember. But and I think probably the only among the very few journalists. Most of the people who were part of that network was from the entrepreneur, business, or NGO space. So initially, I felt a little bit. I was not sure what it was like, but it is. I think it's a great network, and because just the other day I was doing a story, on how Delhi is coping. This was several months ago, and urban slums, and I suddenly thought of Sonal, because she runs a project Protsahan, in an urban slum, and actually she put me on touch with one of her girls, and I spoke to, and okay, this was a work conversation, but we also in touch. So I think it's difficult. I think the network, I'm growing older, I realize really old now. I realize that no one, no matter how bright you are, no matter how confident you are, no matter how you think you're the cat's whisker, you do need other people. And it doesn't have to be for the most obvious things, a completely transactional network. I think the fact that you and I are chatting right now, and our conversations is not just, it's nice, I just finished one cup of coffee, but it's not just about us catching up, which is great, but it's also maybe somebody somewhere also benefits. I think these things really matter, because to me, these intimate conversations we have with various people at different points of our life, some of them could be different, is really what life is all about. And the pandemic tells you that this is a matter of life and death, and we have to do everything that strengthens life, the life force, so to speak. So the connections matter, and I think the network, the Vital Voices, these conversations I've had with people, somewhere something strikes me, and then I get in touch, or somebody gets in touch. We help each other, we support each other. I think this is very, and I'm very, very glad, and very happy to be part of it. And thanks out again.
Thanks. We have a question from one of our loyal followers of this show, Venkatesh, and he asks, in future, we need an education change in some country kids being taught with plantation, cooking, leadership at a young age. How important is the practical knowledge in mental health, basic first aid helps when can we see such changes? One thing is parents can raise kids in such a way, but from an education perspective, how important it is. And I think what he's trying to get at is that we are seeing that our education system also, like the healthcare system, needs to undergo a major change. Um,
Absolutely.
yeah, what do you think? And as a parent, how do parents cope with the 21st century young generation?
I am just thanking my stars that I don't have a child. I have only one daughter, that she's not in nursery, or she's not doing a board exam, or she's not sitting for any. I mean, this has like been the most privileged status, and I know it's nightmarish. There are friends who've told me that a 3-year-old, their first exposure to school, on through online classes, and they're sitting on the bed and they're dancing and they've never met anybody. People's first exposure to college is online. But one thing is, I'm not an educationist in that sense, but I do cover education linked issues, and I've written about it. I think one thing we really miss, I mean, I'm all for online to some extent, is doing things with your hand. you know this is what you call practical. And one of the things I found personally, when you go back to mental health, gardening. I never used to bother. I have a little tiny terrace, and just doing things with your hand, watching this flower, watching this thing. I'm just giving gardening as an example. Something practical, not just bookish. I think this should be part of every child's education, because it takes you, I know what a rose looks like at 6 a.m., what a hibiscus looks like at 6 a.m., then how it looks at 8 a.m., and then how it looks at 9 a.m. Because, and I know what to do when there are worms. You just spray with some neem thing. Sometimes it works. I think kids, I've, lectured students. I used to teach in Jindal University, where one of the students from Andhra, I think, said that they used to have a little garden in the school, and all the students were given a plant and they had to look after. I'm not saying there's one formula, but give something which you do with hand, which is practical, which is not just a nerdy bookish thing, which, and I think this is very important, because it takes your mind off. Do something, you have something concrete. It could be carpentry, it could be something, some useful skill which you can tap into later, in life. So I think I absolutely agree with you that things are not going to be the same in the future, and including education. And I think we need, and this is a great opportunity to do things better and more creatively. It should be fun. I mean, I completely believe whatever you do has to be fun. You can't ram it down kids' throats, at least, at any rate.
Yes, I'm not a gardener either, but during this time I've made an attempt. Half the plants have died and half are thriving. So I still live in hope that maybe I might not kill all of them. It's a
But you're
process. I
big.
guess.
I know you're big. I just gave gardening as an example. I'm just saying something,
Yeah.
and it doesn't have to be a stressful activity. Saying, if I must do this unstructured time, which is creative, which is doing something with hand. Don't set yourself targets. Like I must bake 50 cookies. No, no, just bake 3 if you want to. So I've been seeing your pictures. You've been doing a lot of stuff. So whatever makes you happy, and doing something with the hand, I believe, is important. Just to feel, we are all, most of us don't live in palaces. We are in tiny apartments, and I think in big, in cities, we have constraints. We have to pay our bills, we have to work, we have to look after our families, um, caregivers. So I think things which take us away from our immediate, very important. And
Patralekha, this is
active.
a favorite question to all my guests. What advice would you give your 16-year-old self?
16. I was wild. No, actually, not so wild. No, what advice would I give to my 16-year-old? Uh, maybe. I mean, at 16, and I still don't have career goals. I have lifestyle goals. Sometimes those are better, I think, than career goals. I think maybe the advice I would have given, be a little bit more strategic. I was completely non-strategic. In the sense that most of us, when you're in your family, you think everybody's going to be nice to you, and they're going to be as nice to you as you are to them. So always have a plan B. And if it's a woman, I would say economic independence, economic independence, economic independence. Also for men, doesn't matter if you're rich, doesn't matter if your father or whoever, left you a huge house somewhere or property. Don't live off that. Don't live off what your husband is earning, or your brother is earning, or status. If it's there, fantastic. But I really believe that a sense of self-worth And confidence comes from what one has done, and never let that go. Just because you've done something till a certain age doesn't mean now I've achieved everything and now I'm 30 or 40, now I go back. Because once you lose your self-worth, so I would tell my 16-year-old self is, have a plan B, have a little bit of backup, and make sure, for women, I really believe it's about, I'm not saying you have to be IBM president. It could be anything, but make sure that you're in a line which you can support yourself. I've heard of a lot of parents saying, oh, a little bit here, a little bit there, ice cream money. You do something every 6 months, you write one article, or you go somewhere, you earn some 2,000 rupees. I'm not knocking people, helpful homemakers. And I think there's a lot of, all of us, we don't have a retinue of, helpers and things. We all do homework. But I personally think this is the future. The world of work is going to be hugely uncertain. After the pandemic, more so, you'll see that already job losses are happening. Offices are going to downsize. People are going to be turfed out. The older people, the very young and the very old, they are at risk. You have to, you don't know when your husband, your brother or father would be laid off, or or whatever. You can't say. You have to have a plan by which you can support yourself, and you should stick at it. I'm not saying it's something which also hopefully gives you some amount of happiness, because a lot of women, I find, they're equipped, they don't have the life skills to be able to be completely independent. The whole somewhere, whether it's a father, whether it's a husband, somewhere. And it doesn't matter, you can be the richest person, but you don't know what's going to happen to you. So keep, work, have an independent, and that's what I would say, a 16-year-old girls at least, that please don't, nothing, no one's worth giving up anything for. And they will get round to it. Assert yourself over there. And if a guy doesn't let you work, he's not worth it. In my view. I'm very
Yes.
blunt on this. It's a survival kit. When you're drowning in
Yeah.
the deep end, you need a life jacket. And that life jacket is your economic independence, which will give you lots of other things. Nobody else is going to, give you swimming lessons when you're in the deep sea. So to me, this is very important. I personally come from a family where this was stressed to me, but maybe I could have been more strategic. I would have probably struggled less, but no regrets.
Well, thank you so much, Patralekha. I think that was really good advice. Be strategic and make the right choices. As Sheryl Sandberg said, choosing the right partner in life is the best career choice that one can make. So thank you so much. And it's been such
Thank
a
you.
wonderful, time chatting with you. I've had two
Nice.
weeks break on Sunday Reflections, and I'm so glad I came back to you because it's full of joy, full of positivity, and it'll take me through my week. So thank you once again for sharing your evening with me.
Thank you so much. And I don't think you need a partner. You have to be your own resource.
Absolutely. I
I think a
think
partner is optional.
yeah.
My partner
You
is completely optional.
Yes, I think,
Yeah, I mean,
when people should really look at themselves as, their full being. And then if they find another person, that's fine. But never look for somebody to complete them, because there's no such thing.
exactly. Nobody can complete you. If you have emptiness within, you have to fulfill it. Somebody can let you grow, but they can't complete you. That I believe that. And I've been married 34 years. So I really believe I'm not dependent in any way. So, but I think this is important. Partner is not important. But if you have a good partner, that's great.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Have a good evening.